having accidentally let in a T-Rex via the shutters to the third energy reactor, the large dinosaur quickly devoured and eviscerated a large amount of the rebel guerillas who were frozen in terror at what they were seeing. Their guns were ineffective, and they were unable to do anything before being eaten, crushed underfoot, or slammed fatally by its tail. As the rebels ran away, their leader launched a canister of tear gas that distracted the beast and allowed the survivors to run away. Undeterred in gaining what they came for, the leader orders Gale to find the database and make a copy of the third energy research, while he and his team will head to the reactor. Returning to the facility, Rick, Regina, and Kirk decided the best course of action would be to wipe the research data and then destroy the core of the reactor, leaving the rebels with nothing. Rick departs from the helicopter and makes his way to the database, having already memorized the layout from his time in the control room. Taking a large elevator down, he finds it very odd that there are no rebels in his way, suspecting that they could have already been eaten by dinosaurs. As he arrives, he finds out which computer he needs to use, but understands that this system is difficult. For a moment, he thinks that the third energy research is an amazing leap in scientific discovery, and that it would be a shame to wipe it all. So, instead decides that he will save a copy and give it back to Dr. Kirk. Once the transfer to disk is completed, he wipes the data from the system. However, Gale arrives just moments too late and is enraged that the data is gone. Rick taunts him with the only surviving copy of the data and throws it in the air, allowing him to distract Gale and launch a surprise attack against the traitorous captain. Rick sprints to the elevator and closes the door, but Gale manages to keep up and leapt through the gap, demanding the disk be handed over to him. Gale yells that Rick has no reason to hold on to the data, and if he hands it over, he will be allowed to live, but Rick isn't easily persuaded and knows that he's lying. The two struggle in a melee, equally matched and unable to get the better of each other. The elevator came to a sudden halt, knocking Rick off balance. Gale leapt on top of him, holding him down at knife point, ready to kill his former teammate. But as the doors opened, Rick could see the murderous jaws of a huge beast, and tried to warn Gale, who simply thought it was a trick. Rick, in horror, yelled at him to believe him. Gale turned and noticed that they were now both trapped in the elevator with the Tyrannosaurus Rex that had killed many rebels earlier. The helicopter flies over the power plant that houses a third energy generator. Kirk confirms that this is indeed what they were looking for, but they are now faced with the problem of how to destroy it, as the helicopter itself doesn't have the firepower capable. Kirk suggests that they overload the generator manually, which would send the entire device to a different space and time, and therefore making it impossible for the rebels to gain its power. But as they were discussing their plan, they were unaware that they had caught the attention of pterodactyls who had suddenly surrounded their vehicle and attempted to attack it, believing it to be some kind of enemy or prey. As they hit against its side, some were caught up in the propellers and gruesomely sliced up. The damage the chopper sustained caused it to go into a nosedive. Regina knew that their only option for survival was to jump out just before it hits the bed of steel containers below. The two jumped out very high up. Regina used her grappling gun and shot it towards the container, allowing them both to reach the ground relatively unharmed. But as she landed, the pterodactyl saw an opportunity and grabbed her, lifting her into the air by her shoulders. If it continued at this level, Regina would be torn to pieces in a large fan that was active in front of her. She pulled out a small handgun and shot at it, causing it to let go. The unfortunate dinosaur lost control and got sucked into the fan, where it was cut to pieces by the blades. Regina managed to survive the fall by using her trusty grappling gun once again, and safely lowered herself to the ground, where she met up with the doctor, who was in awe at her survival skills. She explains that her training has given her the strength and the know-how to avoid death in many different situations. The two finally reached the third energy generator. a large cylindrical structure surrounded by a circular wall of concrete. Kirk is proud of his creation, knowing that there is no other energy in the world that is as powerful as this, but is quickly reminded by Regina that it's also a very dangerous weapon. He understands that it must be destroyed, but feels disappointed that his masterpiece and years of research must come to such an unfitting end. Explaining the plan on how to destroy it, Kirk says that the generator relies on a stabilizer to limit its strength. Lowering it means the generator will be transported to a different space and time due to the overloading. The whole process should take around 5 minutes. Before they could continue any further, they heard that someone was approaching and quickly hid. It was the rebel leader and several of his soldiers who knew that there was someone there. He demanded that they showed themselves, then noticed that the generator had started up and deduced that it was Dr. Kirk himself. The leader told him to come out again, saying that if he gave himself up, he would not be harmed, as they need him to show them how to use the third energy. Judging from the amount of footsteps, Regina suspected there were around 7 or 8 soldiers, but that became an even bigger problem after realizing she only had 1 bullet left. Kirk only needs 3 minutes, and asks Regina if she can stall them for that time. The leader tries once again to convince Kirk to come out. When he sees a white lab coat, he immediately opens fire before realizing that Kirk wasn't wearing it, and was suddenly ambushed by Regina, holding him up and taking him as a hostage. She orders the soldiers to drop their weapons and stand back, otherwise he dies. They followed, not wanting harm to come to their boss. Kirk says that he needs just 1 more minute. The leader suspects that they were trying to destroy the core, and suddenly launches a surprise attack on Regina, knocking her off balance and surrounded by the soldiers. As the rebels gained the upper hand, Kirk desperately tried to continue the plan, but was suddenly shot at by a soldier trying to stop him. The bullet hit his shoulder, but he was able to complete the operation, and the generator sprung into action and began to destabilize in a terrific display of electricity. Everyone is shocked at what they were seeing, especially Kirk, who realized that something has gone very wrong. It has gone out of control and is even more destabilized than he had anticipated. Strong winds blew like a tornado around the generator. Before they knew it, the winds had stopped. The generator had calmed down, but now they were surrounded by plants and beasts from a different time. It appeared as if the island had now shared itself with the prehistoric world. One thing I didn't actually mention in episode 2, as I hadn't noticed it until writing the script for episode 4, is that Gale no longer has a scar across the right side of his face. While in the game it's simply a part of his character design and there was no mention or any hint of a story behind it, it's just interesting to note that it's absent in the comic version for some reason. I quite like the implication of it with these being separate timelines. It's like all these little details really show that there were major changes in some of these characters' lives before the events of this mission, and it's caused them to take drastic changes in their life paths. At several points in the game, you're able to block dinosaurs from coming into contact with you by the use of security lasers that you're able to turn on and off at will. It provides a great defense as well as a perfect evasive strategy in stun and run. However, certain areas have buttons that are not lasers, but some kind of gas that stun them for a few moments, giving you time to either kill them or run away. The scene with the T-Rex attacking the rebels, causing them to hit it with tear gas, seems very reminiscent of this strategy. The computer database is another new location for the series, and appears to be another control room functioning similarly to one seen towards the end of the game, where Regina must power up the third energy generator. It's not the same in appearance or function, but seems to be the place most linked with the control of the generator. Rick being a master at his computer skills is shown here, by him noting that the systems he's left to work with are difficult and complex, but he's able to break through them and obtain the research data. In-game, as you progress, Rick changes to different control rooms across the facility. The first one he says is too easy to break into.
This security system is a snap for me, real amateur stuff.
But later on in another control room, remarks that it's a lot tougher.
These security protocols are brutal. Finally, a challenge worthy of my talents.
Once he's finished, he obtains a disk of the third energy data, just like the object that Gale successfully obtains as part of his secret mission in game. We see the actual physical item in the ending in which he dies, but we don't actually see it due to the graphical limitations, but we know he handed it over to her. What I don't quite understand, however, is why Rick saves the data. Sure, it's a unique and very powerful piece of machinery that's never been seen before, but it's also a highly abusable weapon that's currently being developed by an unknown nation that's enemies with the US, and is being hunted for by an unknown platoon of guerrilla rebels and a traitor to the US government. Destroying it was the plan that they all agreed to, but suddenly Rick decides that it's best to save a copy and hand it to Kirk so he can continue his research. This is the same Dr. Kirk who caused the deaths of many people at the facility, including his friend Tom and fellow agent Cooper, at most a few hours ago left the team to die from a raptor horde and held them up at gunpoint to get himself off the island. This change in direction really doesn't make sense and seems to only be there for the plot to move forward as Gale appears and they fight over the disc. It would have made a lot more sense for Gale to have copied the data first and then have Rick demand he hands it over, rather than the reverse. Throughout the game, and even from the very beginning, we can see the dynamic between the team members, especially Gale and Rick. While they're both professionals on a mission, they have their own ways of going about it and how and when things should be done. As such, their conflicting natures are a recurring theme.
Stay here, Junior. Leave the guards to me.
That's your way of operating, not mine. You have your access to the underground, Gale, so get moving.
That punk is really starting to get on my nerves.
I know. You just have to trust me.
I don't.
Despite this, when Rick sees that Gale has life-threatening injuries after risking himself to save Dr. Kirk, he shows a genuine concern for his leader and even becomes emotional at the situation.
Gale, what happened to him?
I don't know, but Kirk's gone.
I'm gonna kill him!
This shows a great deal of respect and closeness, even if they disagree at times. In the comic, the tension between the two doesn't exactly seem as prominent, as the only time they disagree before the big betrayal is when Gale says to leave Tom and proceed with the mission. But once Gale is shown his true colours, Rick has great anger towards him and is delighted at going back to the facility to make him pay for what he did to him and Regina. Eventually the two meet later on and a fight breaks out, which ultimately ends with Gale pinning Rick to the ground at knife point. There's no doubt that if Gale was able to kill him, he absolutely would have and thought nothing of it, considering it was part of his plan all along. Gale leaping through openings is a small detail that has also been seen in game before. When Regina agrees to help Gale search for Dr. Kirk instead of responding to Tom's distress call, they catch sight of Kirk, who quickly attempts to evade them by closing some shutters. Gale acts fast and is able to leap under them before they hit the ground. The third energy generator has a completely new design here, as instead of it looking like a large grey box-shaped machine in a huge open underground area, it now appears to be a large white standing cylindrical tower with a red sphere on top that is housed in an outdoor silo. A very different design, but I imagine that was done so the sudden time warp that happens at the end could feel more immediate with plants and other creatures around them, as opposed to finding it out later after leaving the original design of the underground area. It still makes me wonder why they used screenshots of it from the game if they knew that the design of it wasn't like that at all. A reference surely, but it's very odd. I suppose the same could be said of having the in-game screenshots in general, but for a plot device as big as this, it doesn't seem to fit well. Still, I do love that they added the screenshots though. We can see the concrete walls of the enclosure change a few times throughout. When it's first seen from above, it looks as though it has several layers of wall, and we can just see the tip of the generator within. When Kirk and Regina arrive at it, we see it looking how it did before, but in the next panel there seems to be only one layer of wall, and the generator is tall enough to be going above it. When the time warp happens, the surrounding wall and the area of the generator seems to increase by a lot. Understanding what the root cause of the horror of Ibis Island is, Regina, Rick and Kirk decide that the best way to end it all is to destroy the third energy generator by making it overload, therefore ensuring that nobody can get their hands on it and use it for their own selfish purposes. This plan is very similar to the one used in game, as towards the end it's up to Regina to activate the generator and cause it to overload. That happens close to the end, so it's very sudden for this plan to take effect in the middle of the story in the comic book version. While we can see that the generator hasn't been destroyed as of yet, they still made an attempt which didn't go to plan and has set up another storyline entirely. What's more is that when Kirk talks about how to take it down, he mentions that they just need to lower the output of the stabilizer. But in game it requires both the initializer and the stabilizer to get it up and running.
But we couldn't even activate the device.
You're missing the initializer and stabilizer, right?
So either here it's already got the initializer, which would make sense seeing how easy it activates when they get there, or the initializer just isn't a thing in this version, which isn't all that unbelievable, seeing as how the third energy generator is a completely different model and could depend on different functions. A very quick note, as I was editing that last scene, I suddenly noticed something very odd. It looks as though the artist has drawn Regina, but without wearing the bottom half of her uniform. I don't think I can put this down to lighting conditions or anything like that. You can clearly see her legs are the same colour as the exposed sections of her arms. The introduction of the Pteranodons is quite different here, as they show up when they're alerted by the helicopter flying nearby and consider it an enemy. In the game, they suddenly show up when Regina has made her way to the large-sized elevator and attacks her, causing her to drop her gun and trying to slam her into a wall. Later on, another pterodactyl attacks her when she's leaving the generator room after the pipe puzzle and tries to throw her into a large fan, which Regina manages to break free from. Unfortunately for the flying dinosaur, it isn't too lucky and ends up sliced into pieces as it's pulled into it. Here we see the two moments from the game combined. The pterodactyl trying to slam her into a large fan that is in a wall on a metal structure. Instead of shaking free, she pulls out a small handgun and fires it into the creature, causing it to drop her and enter the fan. This is probably one of the most overly graphic depictions of this event, and I really love how the artist has gone above and beyond to show the exact moment it's chewed up by the blades. Pretty brutal. A question arises though of where she got that gun from. But then again, it's not the first time Regina's lost a gun and pulled it out of thin air. Like in the last issue, seeing Dr. Kirk have a more built-up character with emotions beyond smugness, it's interesting to actually see him be more pleasant or emotional. When he watches Regina save herself from the Pteranodon's clutches and reach the ground without injuring herself, he's visibly impressed and even tells her such. In-game Kirk would have likely either made an attempt to run while that was happening, would have stayed quiet, annoyed that she wasn't killed, or would have made some sarcastic remark about how she got herself in that mess to begin with. When the two reach the generator, we can see that while he knows it must be destroyed for the greater good, he is upset that he must tear down his life's work. But once he moves past this, he immediately gets to work on starting the process of bringing about its end. Saying that though, a short time before, Kirk said that he didn't care what happens to his third energy generator, only that he gets off the island to continue his research elsewhere. Maybe coming face to face with actually losing it and having to do it by his own hand is a lot more impactful. In-game Kirk, however, doesn't seem as bothered about his research being destroyed. He gives up the information about how it needs to be done, and while resisting slightly, he does tell the team what they need to hear.
The only way to do that is to allow the generator's third energy levels to overload.
Kirk understands that if they don't do it, none of them can escape from the island, so it's in his best interest. If you talk to him before completing the objectives, he will laugh that you haven't found what you need yet, adding another layer of his uncaring attitude towards the destruction of his research.
Did you find those devices yet?
At the end of issue 3, Kirk and Regina are ambushed by the rebels in the generator silo. When the leader tells Kirk to come out because they need him, Regina throws out his lab coat as a distraction, to which he immediately shoots at, showing that they never needed him in the first place. Gale's mission objective with finding the Doctor then gets a little confusing. If he had captured him before calling the rebels in for reinforcements, what would he have done with him? He may have taken him to the US by himself and told Command that his team had been killed on the island after he handed over the research data to the rebels. Or maybe Gale would have handed Kirk over to the rebels as well and never gone back to the US after betraying them. But it's hard to see that one as a likely possibility, seeing as how the leader had no problems killing Kirk, or attempted to anyway. It was made clear that the rebels' main objectives was obtaining the third energy research data, so Kirk possibly didn't factor into their plans at all. There is a third possibility that Gale also planned to kill Kirk as well as his team so that there were no loose ends and his mission could be closed, but knowing Gale's personality in this one as a murderous schemer, it's likely he would have wanted Kirk for some kind of incentive. So it seems like the most reasonable scenario was Gale killing his group, obtaining the research for the rebels, then taking Kirk back as if he was still a loyal soldier. At the very end of the chapter, we see that time has once again become displaced and they are now surrounded by more dinosaurs as well as vegetation from a time long ago. This is similar to the events of Dino Crisis 2, as instead of Ibis Island having creatures brought forward in time, Edward City was sent back and was placed in the middle of the age of dinosaurs and surrounded by thick trees and plants as well as many more creatures of the era. The Dino Crisis Manhua released only a few months before the second game's release, so it may just be a coincidence in their storytelling, or perhaps they were inspired by what was to come and decided to have a combination of the two works for its adaptation. On the next episode, we'll be taking a look at Issue 4, Animal Trap. Thank you so much for watching, and if you could leave a like, a comment, and maybe share with people you think may be interested, I would appreciate that a lot. Also, please subscribe for more, as well as my other series if you've yet to check them out. Thank you.